All right, so call to order Redwood Coast Transit Board of Directors, December 6, 4:30. It's a joint meeting between the City Council and RCTA. Oh,
We've got an echo here somewhere.
something's going on.
Is somebody in the room tuning in on YouTube to the video feed? No?
It was Eric.
We might have just solved that problem.
Oh,
I don't want to point fingers.
we
but-
thank Mr. Weir for his problem-solving abilities. Thank you very much.
Well, either way, I can't tell you how happy I am that that wasn't the voices. Okay, can we do roll call for RCTA?
Yes, thank you. Okay, roll call for RCTA. So we have Chair Altman,
Here.
Vice Chair Short,
Here.
Director Starkey,
Aye.
Director Roberts.
Mayor, that all falls in your court
Oh,
now?
yeah, sorry. Let's take roll for the city council also.
Councilmember Altman,
Here.
Councilmember Greeno,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Inscoy,
Here.
and Mayor Wright.
Here.
Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, everyone. We're going to do our new business for this special meeting is Front Street Transit Hub site selection.
All right, thank you, Mayor Wright and Chair Altman. So yes, this is another exciting project for us as a community and especially in regard to public transit where we're looking at better alternatives. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Joe Rye to talk to you a little bit, especially the council, a little bit about what has happened in the past. And we also have a consultant, Jeff Swine from Green Dot Transportation, who has been working on this project for quite some time. Joe?
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. And thank you all for being here for this special meeting. It's really exciting to have this group together. This project had its genesis back in about 2017 or so, leading up to our short-range transit plan updates, which are every 4 or 5 years. Redwood Coast Transit did something that I think is really helpful. We did extensive market research, which comprised an onboard survey of our riders that lasted all week, so we caught most everyone that rides. And then we also did some focus group with stakeholders and gatekeepers in the community, and then crunched that data, tallied it up, evaluated it, and we had a report. And then that kind of led into the short-range plan that was finally adopted like in early 19. But anyhow, one of the findings that came out of that is we asked folks, the positives and negatives of our system, and one of the things that came up is we scored poorly on like safety and security around the cultural center transit hub. I'm not sure if I'm sure you guys have seen it. It's currently not much of a hub. It's 2 shelters and an elongated stretch of red curb. So it's, I guess what you'd call maybe an enhanced bus stop, but it's not really a transit center. But there's no place there for staffing, to kind of keep eyes on things, to help provide information and maybe a better sense of security if there's someone to turn to if there's trouble. So at that point in time, we started looking at, maybe like realistic, frugal ways to possibly get some staffing down there. We've explored options as interesting as mobile kiosk or like converting an old bus or something that we could operate out of during the day, so at least folks could buy passes or ask for help and have another set of eyes on the action when the buses aren't there. Our buses currently pulse every 30 minutes, so they're there maybe every 30 minutes for about 5 minutes, but the other time the area is pretty empty. So we started looking at that. The project had some momentum on our board, so we engaged with funding from the Transportation Commission. We engaged Jeff and Green Dot to evaluate some potential sites and engage the city at that point. where we might be able to move this to if we wanted to move the facility and do something better and different. So that effort was last winter, maybe starting about now, culminating, and we brought it to our board in April of 2022. And you're going to hear from Jeff here in a moment, and he'll walk you through kind of how that process went. We looked at like 6 or 8 sites downtown, some of which were off-street lots, others were like different stretches of curb. Some of the deficiencies with the current spot I hit on the security deal, the lack of staffing, kind of the isolation there. There's also the fact that we have to enter coming from the west and then exit going to the east. So that it causes a little trouble with our route that serves the west side because it has to go through 2 or 3 lights and a bunch of stop signs and before it even gets to its first stop. So it'd be great to have one where we had directional freedom for egress and ingress. Yeah, there's a lot of other things, but those are kind of the main concerns with the site. Right now you see 3 of our buses there. That's the max you ever see of ours, but there's also the regional Southwest Point out of Oregon that comes in sometimes. So when it's there, if it happens to be there when our 2 or 3 are there, it gets quite crowded. So a little more capacity would also be ideal. Employee and general public restrooms are lacking here. So when our operators come in, it's a pretty brisk walk to the public restrooms in the park by the play area. That's the closest thing they have. So often they'll have to close the bus up and run down there on their break, and it's, we don't have that much layover in the routes. And as well, and for the public, it's the same thing. So, access to comfort amenities like that are huge, and we'd like to see that improved. So at that point, I'll pause and introduce Jeff Schwein from Green Dot, and he can talk to you about the process we went through last winter looking for a new home.
Great, thanks, Joe. Yeah, Jeff Schwein, Green Dot Transportation Solutions. I live in Chico, but I work a lot up here for the Del Norte Local Transportation Commission, for the city and the county sometimes. So I'm a transportation planner, and part of our task here was to look at the sites, evaluate them for operations, for the greater good for the public. And I want you guys to think about a transit center as not just a place for the folks who ride transit to get on and off the buses, but honestly, like transit centers around the world are hubs, they're community hubs, and they can be really valuable, a really valuable asset to communities. So if we think about it like that and the placement, it really helps in where each of these sites during our evaluation, during your review, during the public review of where we're going to put the transit center, just to make sure that we're recognizing the true value of a transit center. We did look at 6 sites, and you can see them on the map here. I'm not going to go into all of them because we kind of weeded out 4 of them. And the ones that we did a more in-depth evaluation on, that we were, the direction came from the transit board, and were sites 3 and 4. And those are the 2 public lots on Front Street. The first one, number 3, is on K. The second one, number 4, is between I and H. So going into a little bit more depth on those. Keep in mind that these capital costs that we put down here were for a pretty bare bones, like let's get us started. So restriping, improving the ingress-egress widths for the buses, some removal of concrete, installation of a curb island, and some transit shelters. So pretty bare bones. That's what that capital cost is based on. But we've actually been looking at more of a permanent fixture with a kiosk where somebody can safely sit and talk and interact with the public, selling tickets, talking to the drivers, relaying dispatch information, as well as having a public restroom, and then making it a nice facility for people to be able to be at. This is the first lot and I do know that like even in this picture, the Tesla, I don't even think, this was an old Google image, and I don't even think the Tesla chargers are in there. I know it's changed with the new Shell charger, so there's a lot to talk about. We're not just coming to you with, hey, here's what we want to do. It's more like, hey, this is an open discussion. So please keep that in mind, that this is a very fluid concept design. Just a couple of images. You know, this lot is, I was down there today, and there's a lot of cars that park in this lot. I mean, it's pretty well used, especially we've got the farmer's market. We've got folks starting to recognize that there's a charging station here, which is really valuable. And there is some, you know, existing outdated infrastructure here. So it could use a facelift anyways, but yeah, so there's pros and cons to both these sites, and we can talk about those in more detail. This one would take a lot of, it would remove about 25 parking spaces with the concept that we have, but this concept has flaws. And one of them is that the new Shell chargers are double-sided. So we didn't take that into consideration when we did the concept, but the general concept here is to have basically a horseshoe-shaped in and out. These buses have to come off the street. We got to get them off the street. They have to have a safe place to park. That angled bus parking that you see is called a zigzag bus stall, parking stall. And it's a really effective way to use space when you're trying to stack in buses. So currently, the buses basically are parallel parking. They're just pulling up behind each other. The first one has to leave, or the other one has to back up, or they leave enough room. It's kind of a challenge. With these zigzag type of designs, the bus can just pull right out. All they do is turn their wheels, and they can pull out. So really effective use of space. Our idea for this is to have even a space for maybe a coffee concierge, to give people a place to, you know, grab a snack or a muffin or something in the morning before they take their bus to work, and to have the public restrooms. We've even gone to starting to design like a shade structure over it that captures rain, can put it down into some of the landscaping features, and certainly a lot of space for even a little pocket park or places for people to sit, and for people to wait for the bus. So that's kind of the first site. The second site, Site 4, is the city parking lot between I and H Streets. This site is actually really conducive to our horseshoe style, because buses could come in from either way, and they wouldn't necessarily need to make the turnaround to get to the other side of the island. They could just come in from the other street. So when Joe was talking about that, the directional options of coming and going for the drivers, this site's really good for that. We did have problems with the first site. We don't want to bring the buses in off of Front Street. Kind of a challenge there with turning movements coming out of the parking lot there onto Front Street, because that is a busier roadway. So this site, basically we have kind of two drive aisles, and the buses would pull in. We can do that zigzag style here. We just didn't get to it when we did this first initial design, and I guess, truth be told, we actually started focusing on this site at first, and then we started looking at the library site more seriously, and put our most recent efforts into that. But, you know, this is basically the same. We could manage to hang on to some passenger vehicle parking spaces in this site. One of the things that we like to do when we're designing transit hubs and sites is to remove the conflict between regular passenger vehicles and the buses. So if we could, we would take this whole site and utilize it as a transit center. Maybe we could flop the parking from inside the lot, those outer ones that are on Front Street, to where they're actually diagonal parking on Front Street, rather than being part of the parking area. So, you know, really I look at both of these sites as a blank slate. We pretty much have to go in and strip it down to you know, under the asphalt, down to the base there, and rebuild it. So, so that was kind of the quick evaluation of those sites, and I expect some questions, and I think that this is really where, you know, between Eric and Joe and you guys, we can have a discussion about the merits of each of the sites. I'm here for questions, and love to hear your thoughts.
I have some questions.
So Val, if I can real quick, can I jump in real quick and just talk about some of the other components that have been part of our discussions in regard to Front Street, in regard to Beachfront Park, and just some other things to think about when we're talking about these two locations.
Tell them no, Val.
He's not my boss, so.
Oh, okay.
Does anybody mind? All right, so let me share my screen then real quick. We'll just do it from sitting down here. All right. Okay, so, that should be brought up. Okay, so Crescent City, you're at the highway coming in. We're all aware of the Beachfront Park improvements. So $8.5 million is going to be coming into Beachfront Park. We are going to be developing an amphitheater. We'll be developing, you know, extensive extension of Kid Town, which is right here. We have the Tallow Interpretive Trail, 1 mile loop, and a bike park pump track that'll be located down here. So when we look at this H Street site, which is the one of the parking lots between H and I, as we have events down here, parking is going to be a premium. So there will be increased need for parking really at both sites. But the one that I wanted to draw your attention to a little bit more clearly, and this is really what came to my mind when Joe first brought this project to us, because when he first sat down with us, it was all focused on the parking lot between H and I. Just like Jeff was saying, that was one they were looking at. That's why I said, boy, I think we really need to take a look at this parking lot between the library and K Street, and the benefits that it can possibly have as a regional transit center. So part of that is the discussion around the cultural center. So the cultural center is located here, again, between Play Street and K Street, right adjacent to this parking lot. This cultural center is now being evaluated as a joint visitor center. So a joint visitor center between the city, the Chamber of Commerce, and the state and national park. And really what we're looking at is to turn this into a destination center. So you would come here, and this would be your place of origin. And then this building would not only be that place where you would get information, but you would learn about the experiences that you can have in our community. And really it becomes a destination, and then it becomes a center. So you learn about the area, and then you go and you experience the area is really what the overall vision would be. Public transit is going to be a key part of that. So in our discussions with the state and national park, going to the Grove of Titans, it's a great trail, great amenity for our community. There's lots of cars. They're looking at partnerships with RCT, I believe, and other agencies to try to get people there in a more conducive fashion than just single cars. So when you look at this parking lot and that adjacency to the cultural center itself and being able to send people just right across the street, I think there is true benefit with that. Also in regard to funding and grants, we're currently working with the Redwood Parks Conservancy, who Sal Munoz is here today with us in the audience, their Director of Development. And we're looking at a Clean California grant that could possibly include increased signage on the S-curve area and looking at this parking lot for these improvements, as well as K Street in this area. And here, again, a funding mechanism to possibly take this from concept design to actual reality. So those are some of the other things that I think that the board and the council should be thinking about when looking at where is the best location for this transit hub. Now with that, feel free.
So on the first one, we'll go the one that's right across from the National Park. You're saying you're going to have to remove 25 spaces in order to make this work. Did you say how many spaces you were going to have to eliminate in the second one?
The second one is, it's about the same.
About the same,
Yep.
about 25 spaces. And I noticed on that first one that the farmer's market would stay there.
That, we knew that that was kind of a valuable asset, and yes, we tried to keep that, but, you know, we might have to relook at it too because of the double-sided charging for the Shell chargers.
That was my other question, is can those chargers be moved? Are they so permanent that they can't be moved to a different location?
That's a good question. I mean, hey, engineers can do anything, right?
Right, I don't know the city's contract, if you guys have a contract or,
I'm sure we do have a lease agreement with them. You know, you build that kind of a facility, it takes the capital improvement. So there was a, gosh, was it 10 years?
It's a license, but I believe for a certain amount of time, I mean, if we wanted to move the city, would have to pay for the bill.
so that would increase the 725
Yes.
even higher.
And I believe though the license is for those 4 spaces that was shown, or 3 spaces, whatever it is. So, I mean, that is what they have that license for, was just what you have shown to be kept.
Right, and we could probably work around that. We already took out one of the bays. We had 6 total, so we already took out 1. So we might be able to massage the design to do that. And keep in mind, there has been some, you know, discussions about the spaces right in front of the buildings, not the library, but those other buildings. I know they have a parking lot on the other side, that little mall there, but those parking spaces are used, and the city's going to have to make a choice on where they want to put the center. So.
Yeah, because what, you know, I mean, I would love to see our farmer's market stay there. However, I can see how that might get complicated with traffic and the buses, and how would we separate the 2 areas out? But that's just another question. On the first one, I for sure didn't see it on the second one, but on the first one, is there any covered area? We have a lot of weather, so I was just
Yes.
wondering, is there a covered area where people could wait in the rain for their transportation?
Yep, there would be covered areas on both of them.
On both, okay.
Those concepts just weren't ready to show yet, but yeah, planning on full coverage of that whole area.
Okay, and then on the first one, are the trees still there? I think those have been removed, if I,
Yeah, most of the big trees in the library site have been removed, yeah.
okay. And then, has anybody talked with the library and see what their feelings on this are?
I haven't.
Okay, so we don't know, because that's going to cut into the parking for the library. You could argue that riding the bus to that area to go straight to the library is a great thing, but I
Yeah.
just wondered if we've heard from them on that aspect, because the library is a big deal in this town.
Right.
I know a lot of people that love the library. And then you said on the second one that you could do the zigzag design. And I'm sorry, I wrote it down, but it said something would be displaced. Who would be displaced if, on that second one? Not
Just parking spaces.
parking spaces?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention too that I believe those charging stations, or the one charging station, has already been moved twice, and that's where it ended up landing. Isn't that right, City Manager?
As far as the first concept design, it was looked at on the more western side of Front Street at first, and then it was moved down to be adjacent to the Tesla and kind of create this electric charging area for the.
Yeah, I remember council, I believe it was because of a concern over family parking for the soccer season. Yeah, so we made them move all the way down there.
And
Just food for thought.
You know, to that point, you know, this whole site could be, you know, improved. And part of that improvement could be to sort of compartmentalize the charging infrastructure, where we actually make a drive-through for both of them that keeps that, you know, isolated from other cars just parking there, for one, and the charging cars separate from just the people who need to park. And then we could maybe compartmentalize the buses and then the farmer's market and regular, like, just soccer, game day type parking. So I think there's a way to work with the site. It's pretty big. So we would have to sort of come up with some ideas, and, you know, my thought is having like 2 or 3 that we could kind of look at and say, oh, this works for that and this works for that. But we really wanted to bring you this preliminarily just to get your basic feedback.
One other thing was, if it turns out to where space is a concern, to where we're cramming too much stuff in a small area, maybe like the elimination of something that's not as, how do I say it? I guess I'm just headed towards the coffee hut, and if that's really necessary. I do know that restrooms are a necessity. Right now, we're trying to figure out how to add more restrooms in the downtown, but I'm not so sure a bus hub really needs a coffee. I think that would be the most expendable part of the plan, and this is all just food for thought for everyone.
Let's take a vote on it, coffee shop.
I mean, of course, it's an attractive part, you know, because, I mean, there's food vendors there and stuff, you know,
Yeah,
once
no,
a week. And
that's a good point.
anyone else have any
Just-
questions?
A question regarding the shell charging things, and Attorney Rice mentioned this. I thought that we only allocated a license for the 3 spots. So they have 6 now. If they're double-sided, there's 3, is it 3 and 3? So they can use, there's 3 charging hubs that can be used from 2 sides.
But with 2 on each charging hub, there's 2 hoses,
But
or
they,
2,
okay, but I think that they only have a license for 3, unless something changed in our contract with them after we approved it.
No, they have a license for what was approved by the council, which is 3 spaces.
Okay, so, I mean, we can work with them, and from a design standpoint, if that works, then fine. If it doesn't work, then that's still fine, because they're getting what they agreed to, and we agreed to. The other thing is I think that there's always going to be opportunities beyond even this, because of the way grant funding is happening in the state of California, is if you want money, if you can show proximity to transit, there's money to be had. We don't ever qualify for any of that because we don't truly have a transit hub. I mean, that could be for housing. There's all kinds of opportunities for future funding with the way the state of California is going, with the importance of transit, that could be available if we build this. So I think the most important thing to me is that we do settle on a site and commit to a transit hub, because I think that's the way of the future, and we need to be looking at this from a long-term standpoint of the benefit beyond just transit. Because there's other funding that we're going to now all of a sudden at least have the opportunity to seek out that we don't now. And I know in some preliminary conversations with the state and national park, that corner lot that when they cut all the trees down, it was going to be this real natural vegetation, and it is called weeds now. But that's a very underutilized corner as well, and I think that there certainly would be some willingness within the partnership that we're building now to even look at using that for some other purposes, maybe other parking that we lose in the site there. So, I mean, my feeling is that I don't know number, is the first one the library parking lot? The library parking lot seems to make the most sense. You've got the biggest footprint, which provides you the best opportunity to move things around. I have a feeling that if we go to the other parking lot, we're going to end up losing everything. Just when I walked through that, and I just tried to picture how to use both of those things. And we certainly, while it is a good idea possibly to do angle parking off of Front Street and bring it to the separation, my take on that is we don't have time for that. We're already out preparing to build that section of Front Street this spring. So that's a good idea. It's just too late, I think, to make that. We don't want to make a course correction and be held up on moving forward with construction of Front Street over that, in my opinion. So, but I really appreciate the ideas. I think we've got some solid options here.
Quick follow-up there. So you were referring to the site where the trees were taken down on the other side of K Street from
Yeah.
okay.
At the end of K in front, on the south end of the State National Parks building.
Yeah. Okay. That's helpful to know. And then to your point about funding, you guys might be familiar with downtown Reading opening up Market Street to cars at 15 miles an hour. They redid the entire area with outdoor seating, 15-foot wide sidewalks, and they built an affordable housing development at the old Dickers building. Very successful project. That project was critically linked. The $20 million they got from the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities grant was critically linked to transit, to the transit center across California Street.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yes. So, Mr. Inscore, obviously you're more educated on this than I am, and Mr. Schwein, maybe you could chime in. Is there a difference in funding opportunities as it relates to the two sites? Do we?
Oh, no.
Is one closer to something than the other? Or they seem pretty close together, so it seems like there wouldn't be a difference,
No,
but I
don't-
just wanted to make
I would not think the site would matter. Having the amenity matters, that you have a defined, dedicated transit hub is what would.
Very good. I didn't want to make that assumption without making it clear.
However, I think the proximity to other things, when you start writing a grant narrative, it's in proximity to the public library. It's in proximity, it's within this many feet of the visitor center. Your narrative is stronger when you can tie it to as many public other areas as possible. So, but that's a secondary aspect of it. Having the hub is what matters.
As grant writers, we could probably write the narrative for the block over too,
Yes,
because
I
we
do.
can get really creative. But that's a really good point because, and I think the point about the funding is that a lot of the money coming to communities is for transit too.
Yep.
Like if you want to go improve this entire site and make it better, you're going to get a lot of cursory improvements as well when you capture that transit funding.
So another aspect that hasn't been talked about is we're planning on repaving 2 blocks of Front Street and reconfiguring that street. So we're going to be creating more parking with that. So in essence, if we do this transit hub in the library parking lot, in my opinion, we're just moving it to the street side.
Yeah, and we could do an analysis to figure out exactly.
I don't think we'll be losing that many spaces, to be honest, between those 2 projects.
No, and I think you're right, Jason. I don't think either one. If we lost 25, if you add up all the spaces, it's probably not 25. It's more like 18 or something like that of the angle parking in the new configuration. If we build everything out up to play, but we get almost all of that back by the time we get to that end of Front Street.
Right.
And by the time we get past Play Street, then we certainly, because we no longer have to worry about the transit area, then you have opportunities potentially for angle parking all the way down past Play Street. So
Absolutely.
you're probably right, we probably can get every bit of it back.
I would agree. I think with the angle parking, you're going to get somewhere between 12 and 15 per block, and per the Front Street design, you would have between I Street and Play Street, and then between Play and K, and then as Councilmember Enscore was talking about, you would get between now K Street and possibly the highway, depending on how that configuration would go. There'd be at least a few spaces that you could add there
Yeah,
as well.
It's a good point.
I just had one question. Either space, does it lend itself to like a long distance bus stop, say like a Greyhound bus stop?
Yeah, we're planning on 35-foot buses, so we could have one that could accommodate like a 40-foot coach bus. Yeah, and you know, there's even some space on K Street where we could have a pull-out that maybe can accommodate the longer range bus, but not for like groups, you know, those charter buses that are coming in to come to the visitor center, to then like unload 30 people to get on the smaller buses to go to the parks. I don't think this would be the right fit for those, so, you know, they would probably have to find another spot.
So I have a question. Who's funding the 725 or the 325? Who is the funding source to do these remodels? Is it Redwood Coast Transit Authority?
Yeah, it's Redwood Coast Transit Authority, hopefully seeking and successfully obtaining grants. But yeah, we have the funding to build, you know, in phases, if nothing else, if we strike out on the grants.
And then, just for more clarification, the city owns both of these lots, so the city would be working in conjunction with Redwood Coast Transit Authority to lease that land, or how does that work?
Yes, that's the sort of the thought at this point, is once we have direction on a preferred location, then at that point in time, we could start working on a possible lease and try to facilitate it from that aspect. In regard to grants, we are talking about a possible partnership with a grant that's just right around the corner. In fact, I believe the NOFA is going to be released. Gosh, the NOFA for Clean California is going to be released in February, and applications are due in April. And so that would be our first opportunity once we have a chosen site to actually apply for construction funding.
And so, I'm sorry I asked so many questions, but on this first site, which is where I'm leaning, because I really like the proximity to the National Park Center as well as the Chamber, what people might not know is that when we do get visitors here in Delaware County, they get 5 times as many visitors over at the national parks. I could have my figures wrongly,
you're right.
but,
In some way.
and so they, you know, then the chamber does, or the visitor center. So, you know, as of now, they refer them over there and that sort of thing. But if we have this combined section right across from there, but still, the national park headquarters would be there. We've got this visitor bureau here and this hub here, and really what I start envisioning is what you kind of alluded to was these tour buses that come in, get on these smaller buses, go to the Grove of the Titans, go to our different, you know, the Smith River, Jedediah Smith. So with that, this seems to be more expandable as we go along. This other site might be just perfectly fine for now, but it seems awfully limited for just buses. Where I would love to see this to be a complete hub where we have, this is where you get picked up for your canoe tour to get transferred down there. So I'm leaning towards this larger one if it's something that is in the budget to be funded.
Yeah, kind of with that, actually, the first thing that came to mind, actually, when we were talking about a hub was having like, I think like at the airport, where they have like Lyft and Uber section, like this is where they pull up, or, you know, or in our instance, like the excursion place where they know where the vans that are taking them to the Grove of Titans are gonna be located. That was kind of like what I was thinking originally.
I think that both of those are I would give up a few more parking spaces with the forward thinking of how do we, you know, as we continue to try to re-envision ourselves as a tourist economy, we've got to start thinking about those types of things. We need the tour buses to come here. We need the buses to take to these amenities, just like you guys have already mentioned. And some of that requires some infrastructure to be able to do that without impacting regular routes. I mean, they're there every 30 minutes. You don't want a 40-foot tour bus sitting in the way that impacts Redwood Coast Transit from being able to serve our community. That's why I like the bigger site. I think that while I don't want to move the farmer's market necessarily. I think the farmer's market would survive if it wasn't in that spot. Maybe it goes in the other parking area, you know, to do that. I really want us to see that idea of these things that you guys just mentioned in that lot, knowing that as Jason pointed out, we're going to capture some more parking along Front Street and in the park. I think this is a great opportunity, and there's funding opportunities that are hitting us now, and sometimes you've got to be willing to move when there's money. So really appreciate you guys' insights on that.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm just gonna stick to our agenda now, you guys. If anyone has any further technical questions, you will have another chance for a little bit of discussion after we receive public comment. But are there any further technical questions from the board or the council? Then I'd like to move it to public comment if there's any. No questions from the public? All right. Well, we have to make sure and do that, at least ask. And so I think if there's any further discussion, Darren, did you have something?
Yes, I'd just like to make a couple of observations. Mr. Weir, if you don't mind, would you mind bringing up the satellite image of those two parking lots again? I'm coming from a standpoint of being on the Redwood Coast Transit Authority Board and kind of going through this discussion of eliminating the few, thank you, Mr. Weir, eliminating the 6 different options that we had and coming down to 2. And I think part of our discussion was focusing on the city and what they use these pieces of property for. I was born and raised here, in my memory, my experience, that parking lot between H and I is relatively very little used, with the exception of events that come to town. And back when Everett's was open, and it's not open anymore. But if you look at the parking lot at the library's spot there near K, you know, just using that satellite image, you can see that there's more vehicles being used there. We've got the electric charging stations. We do have the farmers market, which I think is a valuable thing for people to experience. And when that farmers market is here, that parking lot's full. So I think that kind of played into our discussion at RCTA as to what would be the best place and what would kind of synergistically work with the city in where we would put this transit hub. I'm kind of the opinion that keeping that large space available to the city for events like the farmers market is a good idea. To have 2 small spaces may be limiting to a bigger vision that may come in the future. And those 2 small spaces would be this small parking lot between H and I, and what would result in a small parking lot if we put the transit hub in half of the library parking lot is where I'm going with this. So I'm just trying to convey kind of where we were when we discussed this as the RCTA. Yeah, the entrances to the parking lot, the small one between H and I, they're going to have to be reworked. They're pretty narrow entrances, even though I kind of favor those very simple, semi-curved, tall, concrete amenities that we have in those parking lots. They're probably going to have to be removed, and I'm going to be sorry to see them go. But you know, those are just simple concrete things. It's just from my childhood. I guess I'm just going to have to let that go. But that's, I guess, was where I wanted to kind of convey my feelings, is that if we use this small parking lot over by the Surf Apartments, it seems like it would leave opportunity for a larger event, if you wanted it to happen, something like the farmer's market, say the farmer's market grew, or some other, small car show or something happened, then we would have not only, beachfront park, but we would have a parking lot to hold that event in. Was kind of my thought process there. In talking about the future vision of, a place where people can come to hop on Redwood rides or something to go see the Grove of the Titans or go to the river or whatever, there's still in the smaller parking lot a group of residual parking spaces that in the future, if we decided that we needed more of a central hub or of somewhere for people to come hop on a commuter bus to whatever your vision could be, there's still room for that there, even in that small parking lot. So I just wanted to say that it seems like to me, just from living in this community as long as I have, that smaller parking lot between H and I is a much less used place than the bigger parking lot at the library. So I just wanted to convey that, is that I think is where the RCTA kind of school of thought was, that we could still have a very, very effective transit hub that had the room for the restrooms that the city wants for downtown, and for a hub that has maybe a kiosk or somebody there to deal with transit, interactions with the customers, and still leave place for the parking that would be left over, and even in the future, now that you mention it, other possible places for those commercial entities like Redwood Rides could come. And just to finish up, I just want to say that Isaiah Wright, your jacket is just outstanding, and I want to just say that publicly. Thank you very much for listening.
Actually, Joe, if you don't mind, what is your thought process on this, from your perspective, being the director of the Redwood Coast Transit Authority?
Thank you, Director Starkey. My thoughts on this are that either site would be great. I'm surprised, to be honest, that we're here today, and just thrilled, because a year ago I didn't imagine the community would rally around building a civic facility like this, and I'm floored and excited about it. Both sites could work. One thing we want, and I like the way the direction of the conversation has been great. You guys are looking at the future, integration with the city and the events and everything. They both could work. We, and Darren mentioned this, we as a board went through this process and selected the H to I site back in April of this year, based on a lot of positives we saw with that site, and the fact that we thought we could hurry up and integrate the design before the construction, and we're still got a shot at that, I guess. The concerns I have, I don't really have any concerns with the H to I side. I think it could be great for us. The library site, we'll call it, what I don't want to have happen is, okay, you take this site, this is where we want you to go, but oh, you can't take this parking, and oh, you can't take that parking, and pretty soon we're mixing general public traffic with buses. Inside a transit center, bus operators spend all their time looking for PEDs, for pedestrians, which makes sense. But you throw in backing cars into the busways, and we didn't show it on this one, but an earlier iteration of the design showed the parking staying on the north side, that row of diagonal parking, and I just, our safety folks let me have it about that. But anyway, so there's a big concern about, that's my concern. If we could find a way to really give us that north half and the community to accept it and be happy with it, that would be fine. But what I'm concerned and don't really want to go down the road is, here, go to this north end of the site, but here's your constraints, and you got to mix with GP traffic, and this, that, and the other, and then I think safety would be compromised a little bit. So, I mean, if we could really get that half and be able to keep it bus only, that would be one thing. But if we have to allow car traffic and we can't design our way out of that, I would be concerned with that.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Okay, well, I just want to say one a quick thing real fast, and that was that I agree that's a more active area. You can see it from the aerial view. There's cars there and no cars at the other one. And as far as the farmer's market, I think it's already moved once, right? It was over on 3rd Street. And, you know, so I'm not sure that it's,
No.
well, anyway, I think the farmer's market could move too. I mean, I don't know, but I don't know the arrangement behind farmers markets. But I was going to ask Joe real quick because, you know, in the future, like we were discussing, we have to get ready to purchase an electric bus. And I don't know if this hub would accommodate the new electric buses, and if being near the other charging stations that are already there would benefit us in some way if we need bus chargers. I don't know. Is that something we need to think about or not think about now, but maybe a few years down the road? Because you did say no matter where this goes, we're probably going to be doing it in phases. And the reason why is because of the obtaining grants may not be as quickly as we would like it to be. So it might be better to have it in more of an empty parking lot if we're going to do in phases, so that we aren't disrupting a more busier area. And that's just something I wanted to bring up for everyone to consider. I think personally it would be better right across the street from our vision of having our our visitor center where everyone is going to jointly be in that building promoting this area, having transportation right across the street. I don't remember the Front Street plan to a T, so I was wondering, there is a part there where we have like no new parking on Front Street, but bleachers of some type. But I think that might be further down where the arch is
It's
planned.
actually in
And
front of where the, yeah.
The other ones, right?
It's
yeah.
between G and I Street would be where that area is. So it's right in front of the other parking lot, the smaller parking lot.
And then the last component to consider was the mention of safety. And, you know, the chief is here. He could tell us how many calls he has over at the current location or problems. And if it would be more beneficial to have a hub where there's staff that can communicate with the police department if it has been a safety issue. That's all I have. And then we would have to move on to, after anyone else's comments, to give some direction on the location. So we have to kind of decide tonight if we can on one of these two locations.
Chair, just a couple final thoughts. The activity is the reason why I lend to think that's the place. That's the place people are already used to coming to, and they think as we continue to try to encourage ridership, go where the people are, not where the people aren't. That's just a thought for me. People are already used to using that lot much more than they are the other. I think if all we wanted to do was address how do we make sure that we continue to provide great service to our community for the great service that RCTA already provides. If that's all we were looking at doing, is we want to take this off the street, put it someplace that it's safer, where there's a bathroom and there's a roof. If that's all we were looking at doing, I would probably simply say the easiest thing is to use the smaller lot. If we limit it to, we want to do what we're doing now and just do it better and safer with more amenities, then put it in this small lot. If, on the other hand, we want to look and dream big about where we could go and what we could be, then I think that the bigger lot makes more sense. To your point, Joe, I very much appreciate your insights about safety, and I would be all in on on the library parking lot, provided we can accommodate what you just said. If for some reason there's so much pushback that we have to have that north parking lot, and we have to have mixed use of passenger vehicles and buses, then I would agree, that's not what we want to do. Then we're not giving that big vision of what we hope to be able to do. But I really feel like the big parking lot is the visionary way to go, if we want to simply provide good service to our community. Then we can use a smaller lot, and I think get it done sooner and cheaper. So I think it's a matter of deciding where we want to go with this. So.
Mr. Rai, you mentioned here a few minutes ago, and I just wanted to clarify this for the group, the HI parking lot. You mentioned the north side. Are you talking about using the entire parking lot, which would be the north half and the south half? Or are you talking about buses just traversing from one side to the other, just on the north half of that parking lot? Because I thought I had seen a drawing where we used both sides. So could you clarify that for me?
Yeah, sorry about the confusion. No, we never intended to not use half the parking lot. So I think the buses would travel both sides of the median and the median island, whatever you want to call what we built there in the middle. Like Jeff said, we'd probably go Sawtooth Bays at some point. I think the flexibility would be there if one side or the other, if we wanted to give up the parking and have some other activity in there. But yeah, no, we didn't, I don't think we intended to only use half of it, no.
So on your comments about negotiating cars and pedestrian traffic, how does that play into the parking spaces that are integrated into this drawing?
Just ignore the parking spaces in the drawing.
So are we
No, we would
eliminating those?
redo this, yeah.
Yeah, I think the same concern would exist.
Yep.
If we have parking in there, it's going to be, a dicey situation with the bus activity.
So potentially, then that parking lot would be all transit with no parking at all.
Right,
So that's way more than losing 25 parking spaces.
right. I don't know how many
Unless-
in there, maybe 40 or so.
Yeah.
Unless we did only use one side,
Right.
which to me seems pretty possible, looking at the space that we see on Front Street right now. Seems like only using one side of that parking space could be absolutely doable.
Well, you can only fit 3 transit vehicles on one of those sides if we were just using half an island. But maybe what we do is we have the transit buses be able to go in the same, 2 lanes in one direction. I mean, my thought is we're really just going to have to kind of do blank slate, and we have just space to work with. So I think it'd be important to come back with some different concepts that kind of spell out the discussion tonight.
I was gonna say, if we're going with this plan, I mean, if we're getting rid of all of the parking that's in there, could we not have buses pulling in both sides? And
Right.
then- And then it's not just 3, it's potentially 5
Right,
on each side.
you could have
or
5 or 6.
Yeah.
If we were just using the north side, that island might have to move down a little bit, and then you could have, parking spaces on both sides of that drive aisle. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Now, see, with that kind of potential, I believe that is the place for Redwood Coast Transit to be most effective and best for the city. Like I say, longtime city resident, I think that there's so much potential for the bigger lot if we don't cut it in half or a third or whatever, and
Yeah.
and put a transit hub there. So I don't know, maybe we should come back with some drawings that would give us a better idea of what the H&I lot would work best. And I know it's a pain in the neck to bring us all together again like this, but I think it's a big deal to make this kind of decision for our Front
Yeah, I agree.
Street corridor.
I just want to make sure that we are timely enough that if in fact we're going to try to when this notebook comes out in February and make April, that we don't put an undue burden on staff and all of a sudden say, oh yeah, well now we've decided, get this done. So I agree with you that this is a big decision, and obviously we're looking at it from a variety of vantage points.
I just want to say one thing. I think that moving forward, if we want to become well, in my words, or in Mayor Pro Tem Inscore's words, in the past, says he wants us to become a destination city. I think that having a transit, should I say, hub right here in the middle of your downtown district, and right next to places where people can go and get information about your restaurants and all the amenities is going to be important. And I think that this parking lot makes more sense than the one on the other side. Just because there's more room for versatility. I agree with Valerie on this one. I think that there is will be the ability to give the transit authority that portion of the north parking lot. I think that I don't see why we couldn't give them that whole half, in my opinion, especially since we're planning on making up that parking in other places. So it seems like a no-brainer to me, especially another aspect about this is there's plenty of room to upgrade to make it so that you could have capacity for the Greyhound buses. You could have capacity, just like Valerie said, for the Redwood rides or whatever entity comes through. I think that parking lot's far more conducive.
And I just want to echo that I completely hear what Supervisor Short is saying with regard to the smaller lot. I think that that makes sense, right? We have an itch, we're scratching the itch, we're fixing the problem for transit, and it solves the problem. But being on the Visitor Bureau, being on the Chamber Board, I just know that this lot here is really just for the overall vision of our community. This just makes way more sense to me to have it here in the proximity that it is. I know it's just one block down the road, but we're really limiting ourselves to it just being a transit station if we chose that other slot. This spot here, this makes it I don't want to say an event because that's not the right word, but this makes it a hub.
Public space.
A public space. And it's the proximity of it is just, this makes the most sense to me. So I'm comfortable leaning this way right now, so.
And it has the most potential for growth, in my opinion.
One thing on, we had gone to the north because of the farmer's market. So if there's more room, I really want to get, some measurements down to make sure that we're looking at the safety for the drivers and for pedestrians and for other vehicles. If we can compartmentalize the transit vehicles versus regular traffic and make sure we're moving pedestrians through the site. I do want to talk to the library. I think that's really critical. And maybe the room is better now that we have those Shell charging stations that are kind of they're kind of right in the middle of everything. But I think we can work around it. But maybe the other side along Front Street would be better, and use that two-aisle, the two-aisle bus to bus, and then pick up and drop off on either side of that aisle, and then the buses are just in that aisle, totally separate from the other cars, and we could preserve, place for the farmer's market and other public amenities, And I think part of this is understanding that with a transit hub design and construction, you're putting dollars, and you can do some other stuff as well while you're in there.
I think there is a concern for the library too, at that location.
I think the library has, from my understanding, been looking for new locations for a while.
Yeah.
Not that, that this might push them out, and we don't want to do that, but it's my understanding the library has been looking for alternative locations for a bit.
One last point. If the I to H site is an option and the preferred option, ultimately, we could, guide people from the cultural center and the busy hub, where all the activity is, through wayfinding and, street treatments and, make it showy. Big neon sign. No, just kidding.
Okay, great ideas all around. I think that it's my impression that we're not ready to choose a location this evening. Am I correct? We would like to see more concepts. Is that the direction that we want to give?
And Chair Altman, we do have one hand raised, and that's from our Executive Director, Tamara Layton. So if the board and council want to hear from Tamara, she does have her hand raised.
Thank you. Yes, of course.
Sorry I can't be there, I really am sick. But, in listening through this whole conversation, just briefly, my concerns really are about the public library and, well, the what we're calling the larger location would solve a transit problem. If it creates a library problem, solving a transit problem, then that's a concern for me that, we haven't had that communication yet. And so I think it's essential that we have that communication before this conversation goes farther. I too have heard that the library is considering finding a new location, but where they are on that path, I don't know. And they should be forced on that path because of, a lack of coordination with this. So I'm concerned about that. If we do move in the direction of that location, I think that we do need designated library parking spaces. How many parking spaces does a library of this size need, and have those parking spaces marked off as library-only parking, so they know where their place is in the community. People know where their place is. So I have that concern, is that we can't fix a problem for transit and cause a problem for the library. And if we do choose that location, to make sure that we have designated areas for the public library. I understand that we're going to choose, we're going to work from a blank slate, but those things are important to have the library included early on in this conversation.
Thank you, Tamara. I think, I think what everyone's looking at is that the loop is right on the front porch of the library, so.
I'm just
Well,
picturing.
and the library is not the only entity that's really close that's going to be affected by this. We've got Child Care Council and, some legal offices, TAB is there, insurance offices there. So we're going to affect a lot of people with that option. And I don't know that the H to I Street option would have that much effect on those that are around there as well. So just, Tamara makes a great point. Just another point we should consider.
Any further public comment?
No hands are raised.
So if the board is not prepared to choose a location this evening, what direction would you give? Anyone?
Bringing up, thanks. One thing I was thinking about bringing up is if we use the H&I location, could we possibly have a shuttle that would take people over to the visitor center, especially if they had, some kind of a disability or, weren't able to walk that far, so that would be covered. Possibly the dial-a-ride could cover that for a no-charge type of thing, just to help bring that to a more available situation for those people.
Well, hopefully that we've given you enough feedback to give us some more concepts in a timely manner, because February's not far away.
No.
And unfortunately, time and time again, the slow clogs of directors and government sometimes interfere with progress. So I don't know what the council feels.
Could I ask a procedural question, Martha? Maybe you could chime in. As far as Redwood Coast Transit Authority goes, we have already had a vote, and we chose that the H&I Street parking lot would be the optimum for both Redwood Coast Transit and what we thought would be best for the city. So during this meeting, is it just incumbent upon the city to have a vote in that regard? Or I'm just really unsure as far as, being we're two different boards kind of blended here. I'm wondering what procedurally would be correct. It seems like to me almost that the city really just needs to decide. Is that, am I wrong in that?
Yeah, I think the point is to, have an open discussion about the pros and cons of each site. I mean, ultimately, they're both city properties, so you're gonna have to have the consent of the city, right?
Right.
So, to get everybody on the same page, and hopefully between the boards have consensus as to which site is acceptable, because ultimately both boards will have to agree on that point.
Well, I want to apologize, though, because I was not aware that the RCTA board had already picked a location that you guys were happy with. So that is, I should have stuck with that. So I do apologize for that.
Well, I mean, your viewpoint's great.
No, I love
no,
my viewpoint
appreciate
too,
that.
I do.
I just, as
But-
far as procedure goes, I didn't know.
Yeah, no,
mean,
I
we
wasn't
understand-
aware.
We
I think
understood,
that,
obviously, that.
it's a great point, Darren. I think that what Martha just said, I think is really important. Better for us to have this conversation than for RCTA to go to lots and lots of work. We probably should have talked about this already, and then RCTA come and say, well, this is what we've agreed on, this is what we think is best. And the city council, the other three members of city council who are not on RCTA say, no, we don't like that at all. No, go back to the drawing board. So come here and let's have this open conversation and try to find out what's best, because procedurally, RCTA can come up with, you could have 403 reasons of why that's the absolute best place, but you only need 3 people to say, no, we ain't approving that. And so let's talk this through, just like you said, Martha said, so we can come to the best decision for our community. And the reality is, at the end of the day, there's gonna be pros and cons on either one, and I don't
Sure.
know that one's right and one's wrong. Trying to figure out what's best is always a challenge. My question to you, I guess Joe and Jeff, is, I guess you guys' next meeting is January 3rd. Are you still planning to have your January 3rd meeting?
No, I think that's a typo. Our next meeting was going to be in late February, but this issue is obviously of prime importance, so we can adjust the schedule to whatever, timeline this group
I would
needs.
like for us to come back to me.
Our next meeting started 17 minutes ago.
Yeah, that one.
And I have one that starts in 13 minutes and is not here.
I've
So-
got you.
But I want us to come and meet again at whatever time it's realistic to be able to put pen to paper and have us have this conversation, looking at a real proposal in front of us that might work.
Beautiful.
Christmas morning it is.
That's I'll be here. That's important,
Yep.
I'll be here.
Or we could do a special meeting just like we've done here today.
But I want it to be a
Whatever, Jeff.
joint meeting like this where it's all.
Certainly, yeah, I totally agree, totally agree.
Okay, I mean, we can tentatively plan for the January 3rd if you wanted to. It's right after the holidays. Talking to Jeff, he needs about 2 weeks to come up with the new concept designs. That would give us some time to reach out to the library, because I do think that's important, as well as,
Yeah.
I would
even,
say
we can-
library and a couple of the other businesses that are there, because
Absolutely.
there's quite a few of them.
Farmers Market is another, entity that the downtown divas have worked hard on. There's not a lot of infrastructure here right now, so again, I think this project could facilitate an even better farmers market with actual infrastructure to try to support it. So we could look at some of those other pieces as well.
Some good points being made, so.
Then again, if we could secure a 20-year lease tonight for $2.50, The board would be more than happy to move
$3.
forward on that location.
$3.
So that's 4 weeks away. Is that what you guys want to do, is the 3rd, or do you want to do the 27th?
Well, they have the February,
27th of,
December?
I won't be here.
no,
And-
they have a
yeah.
February deadline for, what was your
Well,
February?
the NOFA comes out, so the notice of funding availability comes out in February. I think the grant
Application.
application is April.
Okay. Okay, so the January 3rd would be fine in your timeline.
Yeah, and I did want to mention, besides the California, Clean California grant that we're working together with, there's another one that's starting to germinate, it's starting to happen with a regional transit partner, and it also could be a good funding source for this project. And I believe that deadline is like late February, so it's good that we keep this moving rather than wait. So, yeah, I like the early January thing in that respect.
So January 3rd it is. Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn the meeting.
Have a second?
All right,
Absolutely.
I will adjourn our side till our next meeting on the 19th of December.
At 5 o'clock?
Thank you, everyone.
First item is public comment. Do we have any public comment? We just switched over? Okay.
Yeah, we switched Zoom.
We switched over and probably nobody even knows it. Well, we'll continue to address public comment this evening as we go along. Item 3 is our consent calendar, which is, item A is to approve Resolution 2022-23-05, authorizing receipt of $35,145 in FTA Section 5310 funds for paratransit software modules and authorizing the general manager to execute grant documents.